And we're live. Welcome to yet another edition of PCS Q&A. I am your host, MJ Boyce. I'm the Director of Community Outreach at PCS Grades. Boom, boom, boom. We have a great show because, as always, we got the lovely Megan Harless over here. Apparently, I am directionally challenged. Not a surprise. But we've got the lovely Megan Harless, our resident PCS reform advocate, and oh, by the way, resident BA censored for little ears in your room because we love you. Okay, so before we get to our special guest, who is actually our content editor over here at PCS Grades, who just recently went through one heck of a PCS, and before Megan gets to those official updates, I'm going to go ahead and go through those housekeeping items as I do every week. Boom, here we go. All right, so we bring experts to you. We've brought Transcom, we've got education experts, we've got moving industry experts, we've got military spouses who've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and oh, by the way, might still be in the middle of it. We bring these experts to you because they are the source. But occasionally, you're going to find yourself in a specific situation that needs additional answers. And in those specific cases, we're going to ask that you go to one or two or both of the end-all be-all resources for you. That is your local chain of command, and that is your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the people who can take your issues and further them for action. That being said, those issues, for the most part, we got you. We got the answers. And if we don't have those answers, we know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your question for action, and we're going to get back to you with an answer. Speaking of which, if you have a question, comment, or concern, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Yep. Because we're giving away some more Hope Design bling for you today. And the more times you engage, the more entries you have to win. Now, here's the thing about those entries. LOL smiley faces, while encouraged, don't count for an entry. But without further ado, oh no, I can't forget even the worst part. Oh my gosh, people, we need to do our part. We need to do our part to flatten the curve because we are in the middle of that fall/winter surge, which seems to be never ending. We have to social distance. We've got to wear our masks. We got to do whatever it takes to stay safe. We've got to do our part because when we do our part and flatten that curve, we're going to flatten Murphy with it. You hear us, Murphy? We are coming for you. And without further ado, Megan, those DoD updates.
Hey everybody, so just a couple of updates for you this week. So the first thing that we posted about last week was that if you are flying on the Patriot Express, they are going to start doing some random COVID testing on folks with the rapid results test. I know there's been some questions about, well, what if I already have a negative test that was taken within the 24 to 48 hours and I get selected? Do I still have to do it? We've sent some questions to Transcom. We're waiting for some answers. So hopefully next week we can give you those answers and those updates to that. But if you are flying the Patriot Express out of Seattle or out of Baltimore, you should check in a little bit early because if you are one of those random folks selected right now, you will have to do that random COVID test with the rapid results. And that takes effect on the 30th, which is Friday. So anybody that's leaving Friday, Seattle or Baltimore, just be aware that you could be selected for it. And plan that little bit of extra time for check-in just in case. Other breaking news as of last week after our webinar, we all know that, Transcom was trying to move our PCS process into the new contract, the GHC, the Global Household Goods Contract. That contract, was awarded back in April to one team of companies. There were a couple of protests over the summer. Those got handled. And then there was a new set of protests that we've been kind of waiting on. Well, GAO, the Government Accountability Office, kind of ruled on that last week and sustained the protest on 5 different accounts. Those 5 counts were basically some kind of reporting and documentation issues that they had. So Transcom, that award to that one team that was awarded the contract, it had to be pulled. And so Transcom is now addressing those issues. The process is going to be delayed, I suspect, probably up for a year. But Transcom is still working on kind of what that process is going to look like now, whether we start the bid process over, if they can just fix those issues and look at the bid proposals that they have and re-award from there. There's a lot of questions that aren't really answered right now. So it's just going to take some time while they figure out what they need to do before we know exactly what's going on. But like I said, we were expected to move into this new contract, this new process of having one company manage all the shipments every year. We were supposed to move into it in 2021. That's probably going to be delayed now to at least 2022. So that changes nothing in the interim. So right now, until further notice, we are still PCSing with the same process that we have and that we've been under. So nothing is affected. It just delays the new program that we were going to transition to. But that's all I've got for now. So I'll send it back to you, MJ.
Awesome. Thank you for those DoD updates, those PCS updates, those all the thing updates, because that's why we have Megan, because she is our policy guru. Now, on to business. I'd like to introduce to you Lizanne Lightfoot, who is our content editor, yes, at PCS Grades. Oh my gosh, I need some more coffee. Hey, can you get that for me? Thanks. Yes, and she just got off is still going through a PCS herself, and it was across the country, and it was a Diddy / PPM move, and oh, by the way, it was with a family of 7. Yeah, because she likes to live dangerously. So, Lizanne, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction, MJ. I am Lizanne Lightfoot. I'm the content editor at PCS Grades, and I also write as the seasoned spouse on my blog and many military websites. And it's been an honor to offer resources and be a support for military families for several years now in this space. PCSing is not new to us. This was my 5th PCS move as a spouse and as a official person being moved with the military. My husband did a few additional before we were married, but it was the one with the most people in our family. So we set a record for that.
Word. A record. Okay. We like to break records. We like to break barriers. We like to hit the ceiling. We like to make it explode. We like to put Murphy in his place. And the only way we're going to do that is with people like you who are willing to take that risk. Okay, we're going to dive right into those questions. So are you ready?
Sure.
Y'all ready for this? Da-da-da. Okay. So I want to know first of all, how many PCSs that you've done in the past. And I kind of want to know how this particular one may have differed aside from COVID, because that's like totally the obvious. But aside from COVID, like how has that differed from past PCSs? And were they all PPMs or just
not all of them? Military? Because we were actually stationed overseas, and you can't move yourself overseas. So actually the only 2 times we've had the military move us was to and from Spain. So those were both regular military overseas moves. Our other 3 moves were domestic, and we did do them as PPM Diddy moves. There was this one 2 years ago, was a very short notice and short distance PPM. We went from Camp Pendleton to San Diego, so only a couple hours away, both within the state of California. And then, gosh, I think it was 2008 was our very first one, my first as a spouse. We went from Quantico, Virginia to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So again, it was a one-day drive, but not an epic road trip. So this was our longest distance PPM as well.
Gotcha. And how many total was that?
5.
So besides going to OCONUS, you guys have always done a PPM. So what is your decision that you guys always decide to do the PPM rather than having the military move you? And when you do your PPM, especially this last one, the one that you're finishing up now, like what kind of method do you use for moving your stuff? Like, do you guys rent a U-Haul and load it and drive it? Do you use pods or another method? Like, how do you guys go about getting your stuff from A to B?
Yeah, so each move has been different, and I will start off by saying that we aren't necessarily a big fan of the PPM Diddy move. It's not like we set out, 12, 13 years ago saying, yeah, we're going to do all of our moves ourselves. A few of them, including this one, we initially intended to let the military move us, and then for various reasons felt kind of pushed or, compelled to do the PPM. So we were open to both. And when we had first arrived in San Diego, we said we had just come off of a Diddy move, and we said, we'll never do that again. We're definitely letting the military move us from here on out. And when he got his orders this year, he got promoted. So the orders were a little bit unexpected. It was out of our regular rotation cycle. Anyway, he got the orders. It was during COVID. And initially we were planning to do the military move. And as the COVID numbers went up and everything was stopped, and the moving industry was all kind of backed up and jammed up, the more that we started hearing about people's moves getting messed up this year, and realizing that we wanted to move at a very particular date, and the military would not necessarily let us choose the precise week that we wanted to move, things just kind of fell into place for this to be a PPM. So that was sort of our motivation for doing it. And then, of course, the money is a great incentive this year. I know Megan has told us many times that the reimbursement went up from 95% of what the military usually pays you to 100. And that little bit did help convince us that, it's really worth our while to do it this time. So because this was the longest distance, to answer your question about how we moved, we had to do it a little bit differently this time. It's about a 4 or 5 day drive from California to Mississippi. We did not want to do that ourselves in a moving truck. And frankly, when we compared the U-Haul rates to the moving rates of the company called U-Pack, we realized that U-Pack was only slightly more expensive, but they're actually driving the trailer for you. They drop off an empty trailer at your house. You load it up within about a 48-hour period. They drive it to your location and then repeat the process. So for us this time, that was the best way to do the work ourselves, pay the least amount of money, but not have to drive a moving truck across the country. For the past moves, because they were more short distance and we could do the move within 1 day, we did rent a U-Haul and pack that ourselves.
Okay, so speaking of packing, we're going to kind of go through some of this step by step, because understanding the challenges will also give us the tips, right? So when it comes to the pre-pack / loading aspect of this part of your PCS, what was your biggest Murphy issue? And give us the dirt and how you may or may not have rectified it, or can you give a tip on how you might have done it different?
Yeah, one thing that we did differently this time that I actually appreciated, so not a Murphy story, is that we used a lot of the boxes from the U-Haul company. We bought a lot of boxes this time. In the past, we were being cheap. We got a lot of free boxes from the commissary or from the, take a box, leave a box outside the U-Haul store, from other people doing moves, things like that. And it's a great way to save money. But it does mean that you end up with various sizes of boxes that are in various conditions of stability. And honestly, it makes your packing process a little bit more complicated because nothing is working together and fitting together in the truck. And this time, because we had ordered almost all of our boxes were either from U-Haul or from like a big bulk order on Amazon, that everything was consistent. And so we had whole sets of boxes that we could just say, hey, we need a row of mediums here. And we'd have like 20 boxes to choose from. And so we could kind of consistently stack the same size boxes. And that definitely made a difference this time compared to the other moves. It is a little bit more out of pocket, but it did make the process go smoother. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just have to think that, especially during this time of COVID, purchasing your own boxes and having your own boxes and knowing that you were the only one using those boxes had to be a bigger peace of mind for you and your family as well.
That was part of it too. I don't consider myself to be, a germaphobe or hypervigilant or anything during this particular time, but that was another reason that kind of pushed us toward the PPM, that, we would have much more control over the process. There's no one walking in and out of our home and touching our things. And, it's just adding more families and more people and more exposure. And we figured we're already traveling across several states. We don't need any more exposure than we're getting. So,
yeah. And having the same size boxes too. If anybody's tried packing a truck with various, it is definitely 3D Tetris at its finest. So I just have to say, that's a great tip too, to make sure you have all the same size boxes. And that has to definitely be you know, we all joke that, you know, doing a PPM is like a true test of your marriage. So I imagine having the same size box, like, definitely makes that process a little bit better for everybody. So, you know, we talked about, you know, the pre-packing, the loading issues and experience that you had. So what about, you know, those several days you spent on the road going from point A to point B? Like, what were your biggest struggles with that piece of it? Or, you know, a tip that you could give, something you do different? How was it stopping, you know, at hotels, food stops and everything, especially during this time where, you know, state regulations are different, you know, between mask mandates, between number of people in a establishment? How did you guys handle that?
Yeah, it was definitely more challenging. In our previous moves, we have tried to, you know, take a relaxing trip and make it in a little bit of a vacation, find places to stop, visit people, all of that. And of course, this year that was off the table. We were very much just doing a point A to B, you know, not stopping to see anything. We had extra time. We even considered, you know, hey, maybe we should go out here, or what is there to see in this town? And realistically, most things that we researched were either closed or they had such restrictive rules that for a family of 7, it just didn't seem to make sense to do that. So it's definitely something to keep in mind as you're preparing your journey, that, you know, if you usually like to see the sights and go to museums or, you know, do something fun, that you might have to do this trip a little bit differently. Even in hotels, honestly, one of our struggles was food. I have a big family, and it's a lot of people to feed. And honestly, a lot of hotel restaurants were closed, or you couldn't sit down to eat. Places that we went into to get fast food, you know, even Subway or something like that, you can't sit down in the restaurant. So we ended up where we were driving through Arizona and New Mexico when it's 100 degrees outside, like literally 100 degrees. And we'd try to get out of the car to let everyone relax and stretch their legs, but you really can't. And you can't sit in the stores either. So we were kind of just taking lunch with us, eating in the car. So the kids really were kind of stuck in the car in the air conditioning for the majority of the trip. So the way that we kind of saved ourselves and helped that was we did try to reserve hotels that had swimming pools open. And that took a little bit of research because, as you know, some states are not allowing swimming pools and there are some restrictions, but if it's an outdoor pool, it's usually okay. So we tried to find a place that had a pool, and that gave the kids somewhere to relax at the end of the day, let everyone kind of look forward to that and cool off. And we were doing shorter driving days, only about 6 or 7 hours of driving a day. So if you get to the hotel mid-afternoon, having a swimming pool on site was a nice thing to do while we figured out the dinner situation. So.
No, that's totally smart. I mean, I would have thought the whole time when having a family of 7, I would have thought, okay, 5 kids. How am I going to entertain 5 kids for however many hours that we're driving? I would not have even thought about the food. I mean, I'd have been like, oh, well, you're on your own. Eat those petrified French fries that are at the bottom of your seat. You know, my bad. that would have been me. So, wow. Okay. Good call. So,
and that's when we realized too that your hotel choice directly connects to your food choices. So, for example, a lot of hotels are not serving breakfast anymore because it's safer. You know, they don't want a buffet where everyone's touching things. And we knew that ahead of time. So to compensate, a lot of hotels are doing like a grab and go bag breakfast, but experiences may vary. So we learned that the worst breakfast was at La Quinta, which is, you know, it's an economy hotel. We were there for one night, so why not save some money? But their breakfast was a frozen Hot Pocket, which we had no way to heat on the road, and like a banana or a juice box or something, you know? So that really didn't count as breakfast that day. We had to make other arrangements. And then the best breakfast was at an Omni hotel, which is on the other end of the spectrum. It's more of a resort. We thought that the room rates were really great compared to other hotels. And then we realized that there is a resort fee built in. So there's like another extra $20 per room charge for that. But they do give you the option to go downstairs and order a hot breakfast individually for every member of your room. You do pay for the food that you're ordering, but they gave it to you in like convenient to go packages. Everyone got a really solid hot breakfast that morning. So not knowing what to expect and how our day was going to start was a little bit frustrating.
No, and I mean, I suppose that would be we try to pimp it to our kids like it's an adventure, and inside we're like, how do I make this an adventure and not totally lose it? Okay, so we've got the pre-pack loading, we've got the on the road. Okay, so now you've made it to your destination. Talk to me about that whole unpack scenario. Talk to me about what that was like, and any issues that may have arisen, or biggest tips / advice that you've encountered.
Yeah, a couple big things. We definitely like to know what furniture we're bringing and where it's going to go in the house ahead of time. So we even went as far as to get a blueprint of our house from the housing office. Not an official engineer's blueprint or anything, but we asked them, what's the floor plan of this house? And they sent us a document with some measurements and scales on it. We did learn that it wasn't perfectly accurate, but it was enough to let us know ahead of time, like, hey, should we take the couch or the love seat for this room? How many bookshelves? My husband loves his books, as you can see behind me. How many bookshelves can we fit along this particular wall? And we were ordering some new furniture for the house. We wanted to order it before we moved, get that extra weight on the trailer, have it packed professionally in its delivery.
But let me guess, because of COVID, all of the ordering and the furniture and stuff is all back ordered.
It was delayed, but luckily we did start early on that. So we ordered like a month or so before the move. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Get that blueprint early. If you wait until you show up at your house and you're trying to order your furniture, it's not going to get there in 2 days. But so we had that ahead of time. We planned that out. And then when we arrived at the empty house, we're living in base housing. So we did know that we had an address and, what day we'd be able to pick up a key. We knew it would take an extra day or two before our trailer arrived, but it was a pretty short turnaround. So we were in this empty house for a couple of days, and we went around with the measuring tape, double checking. Hey, this is where we were planning to put the couch. This is where we wanted the dining room table. Is it still going to work? How do we want to lay out the kids' rooms? So we talked through all of that ahead of time so that on moving day, we didn't have to have that conversation as we're going up the stairs with the couch. Like, wait, which way do we turn it? Where does it go? It really helped us kind of get on the same page and figure out where everything was going to be. The greatest tool that we used for unpacking was called the shoulder dolly. I don't know if you've used one before, but it's a strap system, almost like a baby carrier with a luggage strap. I don't know how to explain it, but you each have one, okay? And it's tied to this like giant belt at your waist, and it puts all of the weight, it kind of distributes it across your shoulders, across your hips. So we carried our washer and dryer, just my husband and I, easily. We took bookshelves up the stairs.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that you strapped a doggone bookshelf to your back? A washer / dryer on
technically my front.
To your front. Even then, what?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to Google that. People Google that.
I'm getting a link of it from Amazon and dropping it in the comments for y'all. I've seen this, and I don't understand why more companies don't use these things. It looks like it's much easier. Yes, you do need to use like another person with some stuff, but it just makes more sense to me. Like, you don't have this dolly on wheels you're trying to lug up and down the steps, and you're not hearing the thud, thud, thud coming down the steps and wondering like, oh my gosh, are you scratching my floors? Are you going to hit a wall when that shifts on a thud coming off of the dolly? Yeah. And so I am Kelly Ritz.
I'm not even super strong. My husband is. He's the Marine. I am not. And it's just the two of us. We're the only adults moving in. We didn't have any help on either city. Actually, we didn't ask other people to get involved in our move. So we had to figure out how we could move everything we own with just the two of us. And that shoulder dolly made it possible. Definitely convenient for washer and dryer. We did not move a refrigerator, so I don't know how it worked for that. But yeah, some of the bookshelves, he's got some really solid ones. And there was only 1 or 2 moments where we were trying to get up the stairs and we're figuring out, who needs to stand where and what do we do? There was a moment where I was like, what do you need? Do you need me to go to this side or back up? And he's like, I just need you to be stronger.
Oh, that was some fighting words. Oh, I'd be like, watch this.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying everything was super perfect, but yeah, that was a really useful tool. We did actually buy our own dolly as well. I do recommend getting a good quality furniture dolly. Like I said, I'm not very strong, and I actually have a back issue, so I did not want to be lifting a lot of boxes. So that if you use the shoulder dolly and a regular dolly, you're doing most of your things, you're pushing and pulling, and you can stack boxes onto the dolly and move them around that way. So
I want to drop a link into the comments for another thing. We're talking about moving furniture with the straps. They make these things called furniture sliders, where they will help slide furniture across like hardwood floors and across carpets. If you have those heavy things and you realize like after you take those straps off, like this dresser would actually be better on that other wall, but I ain't strapping this thing all back up. You just tilt it, put the little things underneath the legs, and you just push it across the floor and it moves easily. So I want to drop that link in there too. Before I get to my next question for you, Lizanne, I want to add on something about the unloading process. You live on post. So what is that process like? I mean, we're used to, our moving companies having to go check in at the visitor center and then they show up and drop stuff off at our home. So how does that process change? Is it different for you having your truck delivered when it's not a military move contract? Was there any issue getting that on base to your home for you to be able to do that unloading?
The only difference was here in Mississippi, we are in a gated base community. You go through the gate to get to it. So we did need to communicate with our truck driver. We made that clear in our instructions ahead of time. We ended up having to drive out to the gate, to meet him and escort him on. So there, we have to make sure that those cell phone numbers are correct and that everyone's communicating. In our San Diego location, we were technically on base housing, but San Diego is a weird situation where they don't really use gates and fences. So it's a military housing neighborhood, but anyone can drive through it. So we had zero issues there. We just made sure that we checked with our neighbors on either side, because if you are going to use a 28-foot moving trailer, you're probably blocking your own driveway and your neighbors. So we did try to communicate with people ahead of time, letting them know it's going to be here for these 48 hours or 2 to 3 days. If you need to get your car out of the garage or have access, are we going to be keeping you from going to work or anything like that? So
yeah,
got to have those conversations.
Good tip to talk with your neighbors about it. I know that's always one of my big fears when I see the large semi truck pull up for us, like thinking like, do we have enough yard space that we're not blocking our neighbors? Do I need to go knock on a door real quick?
Right. And remember to measure your ramp length also, because you've got the trailer length, but your ramp is going to be coming off several feet off of your trailer. And that's what you probably want right in front of your driveway. So you actually want the truck parked mostly in front of your neighbor's house.
And don't forget that ramp is there, and try to back your car out of your driveway when it's hanging off your driveway. There's a good chance you're going to run into it, and then you're going to be taking care of some car maintenance right before you drive across country. Don't ask me how I know, but just don't forget that ramp is hanging there. But we talk a lot about moving our stuff, about setting up our homes, getting stuff unpacked and put together. We rarely talk about our kids sometimes and how they go through the process of PCSing. So PCSing, especially during this crazy time where if they went to school at point A, they didn't get to say goodbye to friends before you had to load up. Now they're at point B. How are your kids handling this PCS process this year? Are they getting settled? Are they going back? Are you guys in school now? We're at your new location in person, or is it all virtual? And how are they handling that transition through all of this?
Yeah, thank you for asking about them, because they do get overlooked a lot. I have 5 kids. The oldest is 12 and the youngest is a baby who's just 1 this year. And this is obviously for the older girl, she's been through several moves that she remembers. And for the younger ones, they don't remember as many. And I have to say the older ones did very well with this move, even just physically and emotionally compared to some of our other ones. I think we had more lead time and more opportunity to discuss things as a family. So we tried to, put that positive spin on, well, this is going to be a good opportunity to make new friends. And, here's the options that are available. And we would look up things at their future schools. And, here's how you can transfer the activities that you were doing in California. They have those in Mississippi too, so you can join there. And they really had overall a pretty positive attitude. I think in a small way, COVID kind of helped with that because we were in California, which has pretty much been on lockdown since March. They were doing virtual schooling in both the spring and the fall. There was no option to go back to schools in person. All of their activities had been canceled, scouting and sports and church and everything. So there really wasn't as much tying them to California. It made it a little bit easier to leave. They hadn't seen their friends for months. So yes, it would have been nice to have that closure when they left school for the last time back in March. I'm not even sure if we had orders then. We didn't know that we were leaving. Fast forward, and yeah, it would have been great to have that closure, but it also meant that they had already pretty much checked out of those friendships and disconnected from those groups. So coming here to Mississippi, things are much more active. Schools have opened up again. They started back at school in August, which was before we even got here. They did do a staggered start with only half of their student population going 1 week and the other week. So by the time we showed up, they had gotten the full student population going back in person every day, wearing masks. And my kids just kind of jumped into that environment, and they were so excited to actually connect with kids in person and to be able to go to things again. I had done a pre-enrollment online before we moved, but you can't officially register until you are, have proof of address and you're at your location. So it just took a couple days, but it was really the day after our moving trailer came. We had the paperwork and I brought their immunization records and we went to the schools and got them signed up. So they were able to kind of jump right back in.
That's so awesome to hear how they're back in school and meeting friends and transitioning pretty well with that.
Yeah, and like a lot of times we think of kids as just another logistic, at least. And please, I love you, children. If you're watching, which you're not, I know, but I love you if you ever find this.
Her children are grown, so she doesn't have to worry about having little kids transitioning from one school to another school. And
no, I did my time. Okay, I did my time, but I always looked at them as logistics. And for a while there, I never really thought about anything other than, okay, we just need to get them fed, clothed, bathed, roof over their head, registered in school, see a doctor. Anything else was extraneous. I didn't even think about it. They thankfully were on autopilot. They were good to go. But looking back, I kind of wish I'd have been like, okay, so they're alive, they're blinking, they're breathing. Are they really good to go? But yes.
And I think because we had been through some emotional turmoil with previous moves where it did affect my children for a long time, changing schools and, having a short-term notice to say goodbye to friends, we were a little bit more hypersensitive to it this time and discussed things more. And honestly, it helps that the kids have gotten older. And so they're able to have a little bit more mature conversations that they couldn't have when we were leaving kindergarten. But now that they're in, elementary and middle school, it is a different scenario. I forgot to mention one thing about the pre-pack and pre-moving stage, that I was unprepared for the amount of stress that all of the kids' doctor visits would cause. So it was kind of a perfect storm this year. Everything was closed from the spring through the summer. We weren't even able to schedule like annual checkups and like regular healthcare until about August. And I was moving at the end of September. So suddenly I had 1 month, 5 kids that I have to get, all seen by a doctor, all immunized, dentist visits, eye exams. Like we had so many doctor visits in that month. And of course, that's a month that I'm trying to pack and organize the whole house and, wrap up everything at work. So there was a while where I was completely comfortable packing the boxes. Like that was therapeutic and organized. And you can sit down and say, I'm going to do this closet now, and I'm going to do this box now. But all the other stress of trying to get them disenrolled from schools and complete on their doctor exams. And because you want to be up to date on everything before you move, that it's going to take a few months to find new doctors and find new dentists and everything. I have kids in braces that, we had to like adjust retainers. And my oldest even had a minor surgery. She's fine, but like a somewhat big medical event just 2 weeks before we moved. So there was a whole bunch of additional stress that I think you need to keep the whole family in mind when you're preparing for a move. And it's not just packing the boxes and getting enrolled in the schools and doing the paperwork.
Yeah, and I think, Lizanne, you said it good at the beginning of all of that, communicating with your kids and having that lead time and talking to them about the move and that they are moving and that you will be going to a new home. I think, for us, we have 3 kids. We've moved quite a bit, that it just kind of makes that transition easier, that you're not just springing on them, that your house is going to be in boxes tomorrow because it's getting shipped out. That you do talk to them beforehand, that they are moving. It does help make the transition easier when they're aware of it, when they're a part of the process. I know we've talked on past episodes, about, how to help kids with the transition. And I will tell you, my biggest one is that a lot of movers are okay letting your kids help. If your kid has a favorite toy, a favorite stuffed animal, they are okay saying, asking them, can you put together a box so my child can pack their favorite couple of things so they know that it's in a box and know that it's okay. A lot of movers are happy to let them help. They get excited over it, letting the kids help. And then, keep some colored duct tape somewhere, mark that box, let your kid help mark that box with the tape so you know which box to open right away. And that can be the first box that you open, pulling out your kid's favorite toy. But definitely having that communication with them and talking about the process beforehand and what's going to happen definitely helps make it a smoother transition for children all around.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, my oldest was able to process this move much more maturely and in a better way than previous moves. And I noticed that she did that. She's 12 and we let her be involved in packing the boxes for her room. She knew that she was going to get her own room at this house, which was something new for her, no longer sharing with her younger sister. So that was super exciting for her to, write her name on that box. She knew where it was in the truck. She recognized it when it came off. And honestly, the first day, she set up her room herself. We had a few pieces of furniture that we had to build for her, but she unpacked all her clothes and put them in the closet and made the bed with all the bedding. And she was so excited to take ownership of that room and set it up. And it was the most organized place in the house for a little while. So
that's too much. And I love that. Kids are, when they're self-sufficient and they're able to do stuff, I kind of really, I don't know, I kind of love it, obviously, but it's cool to see them kind of come into their own, especially since you said they handle things maturely. But I want to pull something up really quick. Lizanne took a lot of footage. She took a lot of pictures. We did a few video snippets. Go back on the PCS grades page, take a look at those time-lapse videos that she did, because she actually put a lot of effort into that in the middle of a PCS on top of doing all of this during COVID with a family of 7 across country. She actually did this. So this is awesome. But, just to get a little idea of how awesome this is. Can you all see this?
And there's a lot of tips in those videos and things too that Lizanne did as well that we are not talking about here right now. So if you're thinking about doing a PPM, if you're on the fence of doing it, if you want an inside look at it, definitely go check it out, because like MJ said, Lizanne put a lot of time and effort and work into it to be able to show us the process as it's actually happening. And Lizanne, you did a fabulous job, being able to talk about, a lot of the tips that you were offering to people when you came across something, talking about what you needed to do to make something work, make it happen, that a lot of things that we don't think about a lot of times. So there's a lot of good information in those videos. Y'all go check it out. And that is such a cute picture of your kids. They're so,
that just says it all. Yeah. And just for the video, you see her putting together the table, and then the next picture is those kids at that table.
Yeah, it was the first night of unloading stuff, and you can see in the background of that picture that all the boxes for the couch, we have a sectional couch, so it's all packed in these boxes. That was a whole other thing to put together, but I did the dining room table first because the night before we had pretty much all sat outside on the edge of the front porch or back porch. There was nowhere to sit, so we just gave everyone some paper plates and paper bowls and ate dinner outside. So to be able, after that first day, I put the table together. I put together a couple of chairs, not all of them, because there's a lot of chairs, but getting everyone to be able to sit down for a meal at our new furniture, it was a really big moment. It was like, hey, this is our first dinner in the new house, sitting together as a family and really kind of celebrating how far we'd come. So
Yeah.
No, and that's perfect. That is our life right now. That is life. That is PCS life. All right, I'm going to switch gears here for a second, and I want to talk about entitlements. I want to talk about dollar bill. So hold on, really quick. You know, we get entitlements. We get dislocation allowance, DLA. We get, you know, temporary lodging allowance, TLA, because we love our acronyms, right, y'all? We just love our acronyms. We're going to talk about entitlements. So I want to know, Roseanne, with these issues, with entitlements, okay, I want to know if you had any issues with any of those financial entitlements, either before, during, or right now, because you literally are just getting settled. So are you having any issues? And if so, what might they be, and what might families want to watch out for? You know, tell me about that.
That's an important question. So I will say that the money is one of the big reasons that we go to the effort of doing a PPM. Every family is going to get a different amount, so you can't base your experience on mine or on your neighbors or whatever. Like, do your own research and make sure you know what your particular family is able to obtain from a PPM, because sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it might not be. But we knew from doing the one that we had completed 2 years ago that we stood to make thousands of dollars. And for us, honestly, we usually use that to buy furniture and to kind of replace things, to get appliances. So that washer and dryer I mentioned, they were purchased with the PPM money from the last move. So for us, it's not that we're necessarily making a ton of money off of the move, but we know what our move is worth, and we kind of take the money that we've earned and we reinvest it into ourselves and into our house. And then we do try to save some. But anyway, so with that said, because of our family size and because of my husband's rank, we knew that he was entitled to up to 14,000 pounds, which is a lot. We knew what our previous moves had been. So that's another nice thing about doing a PPM and saving your weight tickets or saving your records, so that you can look back and say, hey, how much did we have last time? And have we bought things? Have we gotten rid of things? You know, so we could kind of estimate where we were, and we knew that we would be around 12,000 pounds, which is what we ended up with. So you could use those numbers to calculate what you stand to gain from the PPM. And then from that overall number, that's when you start subtracting. Okay, this is what we could earn, but how much is it going to cost us to rent the moving truck? That's a huge amount. For us, I think it was around $5,000 just to do the U-Pack moving trailer. And they calculate by the footage of the trailer. So again, it's going to be different for every household and every family. Talk to your moving companies and see what kind of rates you can get. We knew that we were going to pay to ship his vehicle. So that was another $1,500, I think. Yeah. But we compared that to driving, and, you know, having 2 adults to share the driving, for us, it was worth it to ship. Then you've got to buy your moving supplies, all those boxes, all that bubble wrap, all that stuff. I mean, I spent hundreds of dollars at the U-Haul store just getting moving supplies. So you got to do those calculations first, just to make sure that a PPM is going to be worthwhile for your family. But I will say that the travel allowance, which is completely unrelated to PPM, everyone qualifies for a travel allowance and for per diem. In that case, that was great for our family. It is calculated by the number of people in the family. We have 7, so it was a pretty large number. And because of our ratios, it worked out really well that we were in just 2 standard hotel rooms, a standard double queen, you know, kind of your most basic common hotel room. That's what we needed. Whereas last time we did a PPM, we tried to do like suites that had, you know, children's bunk beds and like these various options that sometimes end up being kind of pricey because they are a little bit less common. So the travel, we definitely made money. We had plenty of extra travel allowance. The biggest issue that we ran into, and this is what people need to be aware of when you're doing a PPM, is that all of your reimbursements are coming after the fact. And so when I said that that moving truck was $5,000, that had to be paid up front before we moved, before we got any money from the government. And you are supposed to be able to request an advance payment knowing what my husband's moving weight allowance was, we were supposed to get half of that in advance, which would have been about $6,000. And for various reasons that are still unclear, we never received an advance payment. We are still waiting that and working on paperwork with that. So we moved around October 1st. Here we are now at the end of October. All of those moving bills have been paid, but we haven't actually received any money from the government yet for our move. So it is super important that when you do a PPM, you have to have savings. You have to talk through the conversation. Are we putting this on the government charge card? Are we doing it on a personal credit card? When would we be able to pay these off? Do we have money in savings to make these payments? Because you need to understand that there can be a 1 to 2 month lag time between spending the money and actually receiving your money. So for us, it was okay. We were prepared for that. But I would say for many military families, that's a huge problem to be aware of.
Yeah, so I just want to jump in real quick. So how long ago did you submit the paperwork?
I want to say it was August for the move that was going to be the final week of September, first week of October.
Okay, for your advance. And then now that you're settled in, have you submitted for the rest of your
he was able to do
already?
the travel claim paperwork as soon as we arrived. You know, he had all of his receipts, turned that in when he checked into his unit. And then we had to wait a few extra days to a week to get the final weight tickets from the moving company, to get all of that paperwork together. He sent that to a different place. And so he did just recently complete the claim for the PPM weight.
Okay.
So I know that there will be a several week delay, but technically all of our paperwork has been submitted now.
Okay. So I just want to throw it out there because this has been an issue we've seen several people have. So depending on your service branch, some folks are seeing issues with their advance, as Lizanne has stated. You know, they're applying for their advance as they should be. If you need it, not everybody needs to apply for the advance, but if you need it, some people are applying for it and they're not seeing it hit their bank account before their move. As far as your reimbursements after your move, once you submit all your final paperwork and your travel vouchers and everything, a lot of stores are saying you should have your stuff settled within 30 days. So if for some reason the 30-day mark comes and goes and you're not seeing any movement on your reimbursements for your entitlements, reach back out to your finance office or transportation office, whoever it may need to be, and follow up with them to see what is going on, what the delay is. They don't want people waiting on their money. They don't want people being in debt and out of pocket and, you know, accruing interest fees because they're not getting their entitlements fast enough. So if it's 30 days since you've submitted, follow back up with your transportation and finance office and see what the holdup is. That way you can make sure for some reason your paperwork didn't get shuffled, lost in the weeds somewhere. But 30 days is what the services are currently stating you should be receiving your entitlements by. I know peak season, we usually see that go a little bit longer. Was recently brought up to them. So they're all saying, you know, 30 days, we don't want families waiting. So if it's been that time, go follow up with them. You touched on it briefly a little bit, but you can go back and explain more. So with your entitlements that you receive as your family, did those cover your expenses that you had? You know, are you going to be on a pocket on anything? I know you always say you usually make some money at the end of your PPM, but for instance, you know, does the per diem that you receive cover the expenses during your travel days? Does your TLA cover your lodging expenses that you have, or do you fall short in any of those other categories that you know your PPM amount is going to cover in the end?
Yeah, I think this one worked out very well. Like I said, the travel and per diem was definitely adequate. We were able to stay in, you know, just kind of standard budget hotel rooms. So it's not like you're doing anything crazy and fancy. And the meals were, like I said, it was kind of hard to find food anyway. So we weren't doing a lot of fancy fine dining or anything. But it was definitely comfortable and enough to cover. So if we wanted to do a nice dinner, we felt that we had enough for that. I think it honestly worked out to about a week of travel and about $1,000 a person when you include all the travel and the per diem and the gas and everything. So, which was almost $7,000, I think, for our family. So it was adequate. But we went a very direct, point A to B move. We weren't stopping to do any entertainment, any, exploring. We didn't do any additional nights. We slept on the floor one night at the leaving location and 2 nights at our gaining location. So if those had been hotel stays, that definitely would have eaten up some more of the travel as well. And we did just drive the one vehicle. We paid to ship the other. So travel was fine. The weight and the PPM allowance, those are the numbers that you're always kind of playing with, because you know what your service member is allowed to go up to. But remember, with a PPM, you're only paid based on your actual weight. So we can look at his number and say, oh, he's approved up to 14,000 pounds of stuff. That would be worth, I think, almost $12,000. Great. But if you don't actually have that much stuff, you're not getting $12,000. You might only be getting 10,000 or 6,000 or whatever. So you need to know how much stuff you have and calculate based on the weight, not on that maximum number of what the service member is entitled to. So in our case, we could make that guess, and we knew that we should come out several thousand bonus. And I remember my husband asking, his expression was, is the juice worth the squeeze? That, we're putting in a month or so worth of all this work, all this packing, all this manual labor. If you're only coming out of it with $1,000 in pocket at the end, is that worth all the disruption? Some families might say yes, some might say no. But if you're coming out with 5,000 or more, then you feel like, oh, okay, that justifies all the work that we put in.
Yeah. And let's just reiterate something that Lizanne said right here, that a lot of families doing their first time PPM sometimes don't understand is that you are paid on the actual weight that you move, not the weight that you're allotted. So as she said, if you're allotted 14,000 pounds, but you only move 7,000, you're only going to get paid for the 7,000 pounds that you move, not the 14 that you're authorized. And so a lot of families, they don't understand that on their first PPM. We've seen several in the groups, like, I don't understand why we're only getting paid $5,000. They said our estimate was going to be 10,000. It's like, well, that 10,000 is the estimate at what your max allotment is. That's not what you moved. And so I think that's just something we really need to make sure everybody understands. You're reimbursed at what you move, not what your allotment is.
Right. And so that would be very hard to calculate on your first PPM. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not going to go around weighing your furniture and your bed and stuff. We were lucky. Like I said, we had just completed a move a couple years earlier. We knew what that weight had been, and we could kind of calculate what we'd added. But as you can see, like, my husband collects books. He had 30 boxes of books that we packed on this move, and at least 6 bookshelves. So that got us to 12,000 pounds. And like I said, we ordered furniture, we ordered things before we moved and had that on the moving trailer. If we, went electronic and didn't have all of that, our reimbursement for a PPM would be dramatically lower. Yeah. So that's why I say it's so important to know your own family's numbers, not just compare it to, well, my neighbor made $5,000, so I should do a PPM too.
Yeah. And if you're your first time PPM and you need help trying to figure out how much you have to figure out this, the space of your truck, exactly what you might be reimbursed, move.mil, they've got an estimator on there where you can go in and put in, I have a couch, I have a love seat, I have a refrigerator, I have to move a washer and dryer, and it can give you an estimate as to how much stuff it is that you have to get a better idea of where you fall in that ballpark with your weight allotment.
Yeah, I think we actually used that just to kind of check ourselves. Yeah. And another useful tip is to know how much footage you're going to be occupying. If you are renting something like U-Pack or Pods or even U-Haul, there's different sizes of moving and shipping containers, and usually you're going to be charged based on the size. And some of those websites also have similar calculators. If you have, a couch and 3 beds and blah, 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 are you going to need a 20-foot trailer, a 28-foot? And then you can kind of compare your prices and your space from there. So we were right on our footage estimate. And I think we were right around our weight estimate as well.
So just for the record, audience, this is the weight estimator on move.mil. And it's just like they were saying, you can find like the specific items. You got armoire, you got beds, whether it's a bunk bed set or a double or a full or a hideaway or king queen. And then, just I mean, literally if you've got, just like this, it's here, it's here I go. I'm just putting all of this waterbed, because they love those, right? And then you got 4 items down here. Here it is, right here. It estimates so far, just with those 4 items, I'm at 812 pounds, just based on the average weight of those items. So I mean, like, that's for those of you who are doing that first PPM, I mean, shoot, why not go down the rabbit hole? It'd be a good way to inventory your crap, plus kind of know what you're getting into pound wise. Speaking of which, we actually have a question about this. And Kelly, I think this is a loaded question. Shout out to Kelly.
We like loaded questions, though. They're good.
So how easy, if that's a thing, was the first time you did a PPM, like figuring it out? Like what kind of, how did that go for you?
So yeah, the first time was, first year of marriage. Well, just over first year of marriage, because we already had a baby. And, he gets orders, and we're going from Quantico, Virginia to Lejeune, North Carolina. And we figured, of course, we should move ourselves, because he just told me this is what we're doing. So I didn't even really fully know. I'm not sure that he explained there was a military move option. He was just this is how we're running off of a move. So this is what we did. And we definitely learned from that one that if you are on a 3rd floor apartment walk up, that moving yourselves is going to be a pain in the butt. Somehow we hadn't really thought that through. So that was exhausting and frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how aware I was of the various paperwork and the claims. I think most of that process he was handling at that point, and I didn't even really know what questions to ask or what was going on. I just knew that I had to pack up our apartment and try to avoid the baby getting into the boxes. And he drove the U-Haul, and I think I drove our other vehicle, and we just kind of made it happen. So I'm sure there are a million questions I could have asked and should have asked. And we knew that we had to weigh the U-Haul empty and then weigh it again when it was full. I remember getting those weight tickets ourselves. So that was really important to remember. But yeah, it was not easy. I think there is a lot of trial and error, but nowadays there's also so many more resources that you can ask people. You can go to websites, you can, ask questions in Facebook groups. PCS Grades has a ton of resources on, here's how to prepare for a PPM, and here's what your entitlements are, and let's explain them to you. So I think the more that you research and the more questions you ask, the smoother it's going to go for you.
Yeah, definitely, Kelly. There's a lot out there if you're looking at doing a PPM for the first time. Definitely ask questions in the groups. There are hundreds of folks, thousands of people in there that have done PPMs in the past that are happy to provide you any tips for what they did, experience for, how much it might have cost them for the size of truck that they might have used, so you can kind of gauge what that is. And then also, like we said before, go back and look at Lizanne's footage over the past week on PCS Grades, where she gives us a really good in-depth look at, what it is doing a PPM. And you say you hate packing. So doing a PPM, there are multiple ways that you can do a PPM for folks who don't know. So Lizanne did it where they kind of did it all themselves. They packed, they loaded, they did have a company transport their household goods from A to B. They unloaded, they unpacked. I know some folks who do hire people to come in and pack. They do hire, or they pack themselves, but, they don't want to go lifting that dresser and moving it around. They'd rather somebody else do that. So they hire people to come load or hire people to come unload. Now, understand, hiring folks to do any bit of that piece does eat into what you're going to pocket in the end, because it all just comes down to that one chunk for your PPM entitlement for what you get reimbursed at. But I know people who, I hate packing. So they hire people to come pack and they don't mind loading, or they hate the thought of, trying to pull stuff down from upstairs. So they hire people to come load and people to come unload. So there are multiple ways that you can do a PPM. So it doesn't have to be just you doing everything. You can hire out pieces of it. Just know that eats into whatever you might pocket in the end. But for you, that may be worth it, being able to have that control of doing a PPM and not having to do the heavy lifting of actually loading. So you just kind of have to gauge and see, how much of it are you willing to do? Do you want to do? What would you want to hire out, if anything? And then how do you want the mode of transportation to do? Me and my husband, we did 1 ppm. My husband drove the Penske truck from West Virginia to Kansas. Let me tell you, trying to find a diesel gas station in the middle of no man land, Missouri, was a little frightening sometimes. But there are other ways to do that now. U-Haul, U-Pack, Pods, ABF. There's multiple other companies where they will drive the truck, the pod, the container, whatever it is for you. So you have a little peace of mind of not trying to squeeze this giant truck into this little rink-a-dink gas station on the side of the road. But there are multiple ways to do it. Don't be afraid to ask those questions in the PCS groups. And if you are a little afraid, message me. I'll post them for you as an anonymous person, and you can go and gather all the information that you need, and we'll get you squared away and set for however it is that you want to move.
And I think it depends too sometimes how much lead time you have. Our previous PPM from 2 years ago, that one I kind of touched on, that was essentially forced because his orders changed last minute. We inquired into base housing. We did a hot sheet and they said, yeah, we have a house available if you can move in next week. And I hadn't even known that we were moving until like the day before. So I literally packed our entire house in a week.
That was it can be done, folks. It can be done.
It can be done. And honestly, in some ways, it was not easy. It was crazy. But I think it was in some ways more streamlined than this particular move, because this one I had plenty of lead time. In fact, I had the entire summer to like dread and prepare for this move. So I started packing 2 months ahead of time. I was like, well, I don't need the stuff in my china cabinet. That can sit in a box for a while. We don't need access to some of these library books in his, personal library on the shelves. We can pack up some book boxes. So we did it very piecemeal, which was like slowly ripping off a Band-Aid. And in some ways that was harder because every single week you were evaluating, hey, do we need this week? What shelf should I do now? What closet or room should I do now? Whereas before, like I just went through the whole house and was like, let's pack up everything. And, we got a massive pile of boxes and just made it happen. So it kind of depends what your style is and what type of person you are and how you deal with personal chaos and stress.
I just want to throw out one packing tip that one of my friends gave me, that when you're doing a PPM and you're packing yourself, pack the stuff you care about first, that you're going to pack carefully. You're going to wrap your crystal in the bubble wrap. You're going to wrap your dishes in all of the paper, because by the time you get to the end of packing, when you're over it, when you're done and you just take the box around and you're just shoving everything off of the counter into the box, you don't want to save that for your crystal. So pack the stuff you care about first. So when you're over it, you're just throwing your lotion and your shampoo and, your towels in a box and not caring that it's all, Willy Wonka Whopper jawed in there. So
that's a new hashtag to make. Okay.
So
yeah, absolutely. That's why I said I did the china cabinet first, because it's like everything is bubble wrapped and it's so tedious and it's such a mental task to tackle, that I do that. And then I'm like, oh, okay, now I can pack all this other stuff so much faster and easier. And it is true. We used moving blankets for a lot of our wooden furniture, for the bookshelves, for the china cabinet, the padded blue moving blankets that you can wrap and they protect things from scratching. And we were pretty diligent about wrapping all of them with this plastic movers tape, which is like a huge roll of saran wrap. Yeah. We love it because it just, when things are in the truck and they're rubbing against each other, they're going to be rubbing on that saran wrap instead of scratching, a wooden surface. Mm-hmm. So that was great, but it's also time consuming and tedious. And so by the time we got to the last couple large pieces of furniture, we were like, surely we don't need to wrap these, right? I'm almost out of the movers wrap anyway. Let's just throw a blanket on it and be done. And sure enough, it was one of those pieces that, got a dent in it because it wasn't properly wrapped. So it's true. You do run out of steam and you stop caring at some point.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Okay, so I just want to let the audience know, again, some of the footage that she's created, I only touched on a small part of it in our Facebook, on our Facebook page throughout the 3 videos that we followed her. We're using all of that. We're using all of her tips and tricks that she created throughout this entire move, and you'll be seeing that as content on our blog. I mean, she gets down into the weeds to show you exactly how to do things, which I'm not going to lie, I could have used so many PCSs ago. So like, where the heck was that? But so keep an eye on our feed for PCS grades and for Lizanne's, all her moving tips and tricks, because we're gonna just blow that out of the water. Like, I can't even, like, I wish I would have had that so many PCSs ago. But I do want to thank you, Lizanne, so much for being on. Like, I know how busy you are. I know you're still dealing, with the post PCS during this pandemic. And I want to thank you because you took that time to relay this knowledge to our people. And if you've helped one person, which I know you have, one person, that's what we strive for here. So thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome.
And of course, as always, thank you to the lovely Megan Harless, who's over here, not over here, over here. And just for the record, everybody, next Wednesday, we have Transcom coming back on to talk about some claims stuff, which I'm sure many of you would love to know about right about now. Especially since we're hearing some scuttlebutt that there may be some issues with the whole claims process thing. So they're gonna come and we're gonna ask some questions, and I'm sure they got answers for us. So until next week.
This too shall PCS.
Bye, everybody.